The fog rolled in around 6, the way it always did in Ravenshore. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee going cold in my hands, and watched it swallow the harbor. First the water disappeared, then the boats, then the docks themselves, until there was nothing left but gray. Like the island was erasing itself piece by piece. 3 weeks. That's how long I'd been back. Long enough to find an apartment above the old bait shop on Harbor Street. Long enough to learn that Mrs. Chen still ran the diner on Main, and that she still remembered how I liked my eggs. Long enough to feel the weight of this place settling back onto my shoulders, familiar as an old coat I'd tried to throw away. I hadn't planned on coming back. For 10 years, I'd told myself Ravenshore was behind me, a small, cold island I'd escaped the moment I turned 18. I'd built a life in the city, made detective by 26, had an apartment with actual heating and neighbors who didn't know my family's name, but plans change. People break. My hand drifted to my neck without thinking. I caught myself and pulled it back down. The coffee was definitely cold now. I poured it down the sink and watched it spiral away, then grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. The leather was cracked and soft, older than my career. It smelled like city rain and late nights and a version of myself I was trying to forget. Outside, the fog had teeth. It bit at my face as I walked toward the station, dampening everything, sound, light, the sharp edges of the buildings. Ravenshore in the fog was a ghost town, all muted colors and shapes that could be anything. I passed the hardware store, the pharmacy, the bar where my father used to drink before he stopped coming home at all. The buildings looked the same as they had 20 years ago. Nothing changed here. That was the point. The police station sat at the edge of Main Street, a squat brick building that had been old when my grandmother was young. I pushed through the door and the familiar smell hit me: burnt coffee, old paper, and something vaguely metallic that I'd never been able to identify. The Ravenshore PD, 6 officers, 2 detectives now that I was here, and a chief who'd been doing this job since before I was born. Hartley. I looked up. Thomas Burke stood by the coffee machine, a mug in his hand and an expression on his face that I'd come to recognize over the past 3 weeks. Guarded, careful, like he was always measuring his words before he let them out. Burke. He nodded once and turned back to his coffee. That was about as warm as our conversations got. Burke had been a detective in Ravenshore for almost 30 years. He'd worked cases I'd only read about in the files: the Marina fire of '09, the Holloway disappearance, the string of burglaries that turned out to be the mayor's kid. He knew this island better than anyone alive. He also knew my family, which meant he knew about Emma. Everyone knew about Emma. I hung my jacket on the back of my chair and sat down at my desk. It was pushed against the wall, facing Burke's, close enough that I could hear him breathing if the room got quiet. Small station, small island, small everything. After the city, it felt like wearing shoes 2 sizes too tight. "Anything comin' overnight?" I asked. Burke shook his head without looking up from his computer. Quiet. Jim Parsons called about someone parking in front of his driveway again. I told him to take it up with the ferry schedule. I almost smiled. Almost. The morning passed the way mornings had been passing since I arrived, slow, uneventful, thick with the kind of silence that felt intentional. I reviewed old case files, answered 2 calls about noise complaints, ate a sandwich from the diner that tasted exactly like the sandwiches I remembered from childhood, which was either comforting or depressing depending on how I looked at it. Around noon, I stepped outside for air. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing the shape of the harbor below. Fishing boats bobbed in their slips, nets drying on the docks. Beyond them, the water stretched out gray and endless until it met the sky and you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I'd forgotten how isolated it felt here. In the city, you were never alone. There were always people, cars, noise, life pressing in from every direction. Here, you could stand on the edge of the island and feel like the last person on Earth. The ferry came twice a day in good weather, less when the fog was bad. There was a bridge, technically, but it was old and narrow and most people avoided it unless they had no choice. When you came to Ravenshore, you stayed until Ravenshore let you leave. My hand went to my neck again. This time I didn't stop it. The scar was thin, barely visible unless you knew where to look. A line across my throat, just above the collarbone, where a man named David Rionner had held a knife for 6 hours while he explained, in detail, what he was going to do to me. He'd been a suspect in a trafficking case. I'd gotten too close. He decided to teach me a lesson about asking questions. The task force found me in a warehouse on the east side, dehydrated and bleeding but alive. Rionur was dead, shot by SWAT when he refused to drop the knife. Case closed. Justice served. Everyone said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a person who'd been taken apart and put back together wrong, with pieces missing and others jammed in where they didn't fit. The department psychologist had cleared me for duty after 3 months. My captain had recommended I take more time. My apartment had started to feel like a cage. So when the job in Ravenshore opened up, small island, quiet work, a chance to be useful without being in the middle of everything, I'd applied before I could talk myself out of it. Coming home, that's what I told people. Coming home to heal. But standing there on the edge of the harbor, watching the fog creep back in like it had never left, I wasn't sure healing was possible here. Ravenshore held too much. My mother's grave up on the hill. My father's empty chair in a bar I couldn't bring myself to enter. And Emma, always Emma, in every corner of this island, every face that looked at me with pity and recognition. Asterisk the Hartley girl, the one whose sister was murdered. Asterisk I'd left to escape that. Now I was back and the weight of it was already pressing down, filling my lungs like water. The radio on my hip crackled, Burke's voice flat and professional. "Hartley, you copy?" I unclipped it. "Yeah, what's up?" A pause, then. "Might want to come back in. Chief wants to see us both." I looked out at the fog one more time. It was thicker now, swallowing the boats again, erasing the world. "On my way," I said. I walked back toward the station, my boots echoing on the wet pavement. Somewhere out there, beyond the gray, the rest of the world was moving on. Cars and crowds and lives that had nothing to do with this place. But I was here now. For better or worse, I was here. And Ravenshore, I was starting to remember. Never let go of anything.